I'm going to tell y'all right now, all of these wonderful people would not be here without Patreon supporters like you. If you enjoy credible news, reviews, and commentary on UFOs and UAPs 5 days a week, you want to support this show. What's your name? Marty. Marty, look how easy this is, Marty. Pick up your phone. Boom! You're a Patreon member. I mean, look, it's so easy. You just click the link, which is right here. Just for $1 a month, you can support this show. Just fill out the information and pledge what's comfortable for you. It could be $1, $5, $10, or who knows. Just support. Hello, good morning, good evening, good day, good afternoon, and aloha. Welcome back to another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP and UFO. My name's Luis Jimenez. Glad that you guys are here wherever you're at around the world. Before we get started, of course, I want to pay some bills. I want to say thank you to DOS Tapes. They provide all of the tunes you hear on the show. Their Bandcamp link is in the description below. Also, a reminder that this show is available on podcasts, iTunes, Spotify. So check it out. Download, leave us a rate and review. It goes a very long way to making sure that the podcast continues to go. So totally appreciate that. I want to remind you also, Patreon, for as little as $1 a month, you guys can help support this show through Patreon and Super Chats. We are a public access channel. We're supported by viewers like you, so every little bit helps. Truly appreciate it. We have moderators to thank. Moderators, thank you so much for keeping the chat clean. Everyone in the chat, thank you so much for being here, man. Always a pleasure to have the UCR fam here, so we'll get to you guys in a second. And last but not least, of course, we got links not only to the guests and co-hosts on the show, but to our merch and to our Discord channel. So check out the links below in the description, and it will lead you to all the places that you need to be led to. We're going to be talking about a lot of things today. We've got a little bit of a change up in the lineup. Let me go ahead and introduce my regular co-host, Mr. Rather Be Squidding. Rather, how you doing today? Doing well. I'm digging the new Dust Tapes track. Right? This one's called Death and Disco. Nice. Yeah. I enjoy it. I dig it. So, okay, Rather, how was your weekend? Pretty uneventful. Nothing too positive or too negative. So, you didn't get arrested for, some lighting mailboxes on fire or something? Not this weekend. How about you, Lou? No arrests, thankfully, this weekend. So pretty mellow weekend for the most part. It was very chill. Let us bring in. Jane is not going to be joining us today. I believe she has a family play to attend, if I'm not mistaken. So I decided, hey, you know what? Let's see if we can get somebody else to fill in Jane's seat. So I called my buddy up, Mr. Robin Collins, who's an actor, producer, toy maker, friend. Overall, good one of my favorite people to talk to out here in Los Angeles. One of my best friends out here in Los Angeles. So appreciate you being here, buddy. How you doing?
Cheers. I'm good. Got both my arms and my legs, so can't complain. Do I need to do anything in order of introductions about how I've gone to school and my brain and stuff?
Yeah. Your school and brain and stuff would be great. Let's go ahead. Yeah, I was going to give you a chance to introduce yourself to the audience.
First time for everything.
What better time than now?
Hello. I'm originally from Canada. So I'm from the side of NORAD who we can get information from. And I have 2 bachelors. The one you're probably most interested in, psychology, with the elective focus on primatology and neurofunctions. I happen to be a certified federal drug and alcohol counselor, ran the largest halfway house in the world for 5 years, 40-bed contract with Corrected Services. And I am enhanced reliability screened by the federal government, which means that they're allowed to tell me top secret things. If I'm supposed to know them.
Well, when the aliens come and start giving us brain messages, I feel like you would probably fall into the category of this guy needs to know classified things.
Tell you.
Well, Robin, man, thank you so much for that introduction. I truly appreciate it. And, let's go ahead and bring in one of the men of the hour and all hours, of course, Mr. Christopher.
What's happening? How are you?
This
Good
is
to
the
see you.
head
You're prepared.
science writer.
Good to see you. I saw your other guest had a bit of an anti-vaxxer beard on. So
Was that right?
Protect myself from whatever, I didn't want to live stream some COVID.
COVID's traveling between the internet tubes at this point. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the way it works. Christopher Plain. This is the head science writer at the Debrief, everyone.
That's
Welcome,
me. Hey, everybody.
Writer, author.
Oh, now I have this line on my head. I wonder how long that'll be on the show.
Well, we're gonna find out. We've got a whole 2 hours to fill. So.
Oh my God! 2 hours of this.
2 hours. Can you believe it?
Excellent.
Yeah. So Christopher, there was another article today, right? Robert Powell, was that today or was that yesterday?
You're talking about the debrief?
Yes, of course I'm talking about the debrief.
I would assume it's today because we usually don't publish on Sundays, but okay. I gotta be honest, I've been writing all day and I haven't even looked. But I knew there was a piece from Robert Powell coming soon, so that would be my guess.
Yes. So yeah, that's okay. I thought you had read it. So yeah, that's the second article that came out today, sort of backing up what Christopher Mellon was talking about.
It was like 30 minutes hunting for the mask for the bad mask joke.
Yeah,
and that blew all the article reading time right out of the water.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. Well, let's get into the first article that everyone's here has read, and that's the one that Christopher Mellon wrote. And we had an interview with Christopher Mellon and Ryan Sprague and Chrissy Newton, also from the Debrief, which was a really great interview that happened on Friday, right after the article dropped. So I
want to tell you, Luis, I'm really proud of you, by the way, because I watched that. If you don't mind, I'm going to take over like I always do.
Yeah.
I watched you on Thursday, right? And first of all, I mean, I think everyone can admit you kind of had that, like, I've gotten used to having Thursdays off look on your face, right? Mm-hmm. So you were sitting there and Mataluni was all shot out of a cannon and you were like, there was no squidding there. And you were like, I really could be watching like YouTube reruns right now. So
yeah. Well, no, I offered to help Ryan.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, I'm talking about Thursday. I'm talking about Thursday.
Oh, Thursday. Oh, okay. You're talking about Singularity Lab.
Because here's what happened. This is why I'm so proud of you. This is why I feel like a proud papa today.
Okay.
Because Thursday, right, this article comes out. Now, I hadn't even read the Mellon article until the night before. But I read it and I was jacked up. I was like, he put a lot of key points in here, made a lot of significant arguments, and a point you made later, he painted out a roadmap for activists like yourself that are trying to make a change and already have made a significant change in this conversation, a roadmap. But on Thursday, the day the article came out, you weren't quite into it yet, right? So I turned on the Singularity Lab, and as you know, I had been booked to appear on the Singularity Lab right like an hour into the show, and it turns out it was simultaneous with Chrissy's interview with Chris Mellon coming out. So it was determined it was a bad look for me to be on the show. But nonetheless, I sat in the side chat and was visiting with you guys, and you were really down on the Mellon article that first night. You were
was I down on it?
Yeah, you could, go back and watch when you're first asked about it if you care. I mean, but when you're first asked about it, because I'm geeked, right? We've got this big story up. And you're like, I mean, you kind of gave that Luis like I'm looking at the rubber duck video face.
Well,
again.
but let's be honest though. It's not like we didn't know this. We've known that the Air Force has been obfuscating this information and holding stuff up at certain channels and not being transparent with this information.
But that wasn't what you were saying is you were just kind of talking about, he kind of laid out. The impression I got was that you had skimmed the article.
Well, okay, no. Okay, here's
you really had read it. You really had read the article.
Normally, sometimes I read articles twice because to be admitted, sometimes I'll miss things and I'll go back and I'll read them. And so when I read it the first time, my first takeaway from it was this idea that the Air Force is holding up information and that we've got. My first takeaway was that things are from 2001 to 2009 till present are the things that are really be focused on. And for me, that was it's a lost opportunity to not go back and look at the other data. So that was my first takeaway from the article. I had literally just read it, I think maybe an hour or two before we went on air, and I wasn't expected to talk about it. So that's why I was like scanning my brain, trying to figure out, okay, well, what was it that stuck out? And that's the first thing that stuck out to me. And so then when we went back and I talked to, obviously your comments were like, oh, what about this and what about this? I was like, oh yeah, yeah, that's also in there too. So then I had to go back and read it. And then Ryan said he's having an interview with Melon. I was like, oh, great. This is a good opportunity, not only to help Ryan, but to get an idea of what Melon's thinking. And then, we talked about the roadmap and how politically they have always, for this last 4.5 years, if you go back and you listen, especially, I mean, you could go back as recently as September or August when Lou was in Italy and he was just dropping us hints about what's the Gillibrand amendment is going to be in. He's like, oh, by the way, we're getting this. And at the time, none of that stuff had come out. So
it's true.
So yeah, I mean,
so that's what was impressive.
With Melon, for me, I always have to go back and not only either reread it, but just talk to my friends and say, okay, hey, what'd you get out of it?
Yeah,
because people are going to take different things out of it. But how dare you try to shame me on my show?
No, so this is what I'm telling you. So this is what was so great, right? So on Thursday, maybe you hadn't completely digested it. So Friday, there's the Ryan and Chrissy interview, Chris Mellon, right? Fantastic interview. You produced that. Great job. I was dropping jokes in there. You even put a couple up, which I appreciate.
There was some good zingers in that.
Yeah, chat. I was trying, So we get to they bring you on the screen. And this was the Luis I was hoping for the day before. And now that you had really absorbed it, you would listen to him talk about it, but you would also, as you said, just had a chance to kind of kick it around and really suss out the significance of it. That next day was a completely different Luis. And that's why I was so proud is you were talking about what struck me when I read it, which is, I didn't know all the cases came from the Navy, right? I didn't know all 144 unknowns pretty much came from the Navy. The 80 that had other sensor data for sure all came from the Navy. And then he laid out the sensor systems, and that's what blew me away. Is he said, it's like asking the Air Force what is to track octopuses or ships underwater. It's something they could probably do because they have satellites that look at the ocean, but you would really ask the Navy because that's where they work. And that was Chris's really biggest point was he laid out all these insane sensor. And this is, again, he even used the word classified a few times to let us know, there are classified systems as well. But the unclassified systems, these multiple radar networks, infrared networks, infrasound, which was not even something I knew existed, and I write about science, right? All of these different systems. And his point was this. When you're at the Tic Tac incident, the Air Force is right next door running exercises. When you're at the Princeton incident in the East Coast, the Air Force is right there running exercises. Their sensor systems are way better. The Navy's got this little carrier group with their radars on the ships and the radars on the planes, and they're working as a portable, it's like a catering unit out of a restaurant, right? The Air Force has got the whole freaking restaurant. They've got all of these sensor systems and all of these capabilities. And his point was not, they're not picking things up. His point was, they have to be picking things up. They're not reporting it. And we know they're at least picking some up because they do some of that in conjunction with NORAD. And because of the dynamics of Canada and the fact that you can get information released from NORAD in Canada and you can't in the US, they're actually able to track certain instances where they said, yeah, here, the Air Force actually has data. We know we know they don't have zero. That's provable, but they turned over zero. And that's significant.
Right, because it seems as if almost the Air Force is deciding, we're on their own without any sort of oversight. Yeah, we're not sharing this. We're just not going to share it. We're not going to talk about it.
Air Force officers potentially being intimidated to not talk to the UAPTF, being told to not. I mean, I pulled a bunch of quotes out of the story, but there were a bunch of quotes about that. And he didn't report it directly. He didn't say, I know for a fact, but he had a lot of I hear stories of. And that's guys in Chris Mellon's position. They don't make conjectures in my experience. That's his way of telling us, I've heard things that I can't give you the source on.
Right.
So he's hearing that Air Force officers are being told, and I can tell you, I brought this up when I wrote a story back in August. I was at the AIAA conference where they have the UAP session. It's the world's largest organization of aeronautical and astronautical engineers. And Uncertain Vector, Ryan Graves was there, the Navy aviator. And he said point blank to me when I asked him, he said point blank, I talk to Air Force aviators who see UAPs all the time, the same way that we do, all the time. So Mellon's not making this up. This isn't coming out of whole cloth. They are seeing stuff. The reason they're not reporting it, I'll admit, I have some theories on it. And since we're here for a while, I'll let those simmer for a minute. But I have a couple of thoughts, and I think tracking Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo's progress over the last 6 or 7 years may give some insight into what I think might be going on here.
Well, I am curious. Before I get to Rather here, I'm curious, Robin. I sent you the article. You really don't look at this stuff as much as we do, so I'm curious from your lovely Canadian perspective. What do you think? Even though you're in Los Angeles, so you do have an American perspective as well.
Well, yeah. I think the first thing that, he's made the crux of his argument is, look, there's all this information allegedly, and the Air Force or whomever is not giving it to us, right? They have this information, and it's very suspicious because they're not giving us stuff, which is a reasonable thing. This has happened in governments many, many times. You know, when you talk about MK Ultra, when you talk about all the sort of cover-ups that have happened in just the American government, let alone the world. I'd also like to address, first off, the different branches of the military have very different cultures. And so whereas a Navy man who has a different brotherhood or sisterhood, however you want to call it, a different family connection to the people on his ship, flyboys, they don't have that. And I would argue, there's probably a lot of historical judgment from superiors, like, did you saw a UFO, did you? Really? Get out of here. There's a lot of that. Whereas maybe in the Navy, there's less of it. I would argue that all three branches of the military have the opinion that the civilians shouldn't be hassling us. You know, we're risking our lives. We'll tell you when it's important. Right. There is definitely that sensibility, especially from the higher ups. Not to mention, it doesn't terribly behoove them to tell us. If they haven't captured one, if we can't hold it in our hands, saying we might have saw something, it's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of BS that your general military person is like, I'd rather avoid it. I saw something in the sky today. I'm just not gonna. I gotta go home, right? I got a wife and 3 kids on the base, and got bigger fish to fry. Right. So the culture of the military, I think, has to be part of this conversation.
Undoubtedly.
As far as the 144 and the gap and things like that, I firmly believe in UAPs and UFOs as they are defined. Unidentified flying objects, or it's something we don't understand. And I know, having never been on a podcast like this, when I often hear is people misconstruing UAP with definitely aliens. That's a commonality, and maybe you guys have probably talked about that in all ways before I got here. And I'm confident. Well, I've seen a UAP. I was on the 405 going south to a meeting, and gridlock, And yeah, it was a sphere, metal sphere, moved erratically, went across the sky. I couldn't identify it, therefore it's a UFO or UAP. But I think largely we may have seen a lot of stuff. I don't think we have. I come back to the Fermi paradox. The mathematics on whether there's extraterrestrial life out there, it's highly probable. And yet, no concrete evidence that we can really put together. Even the skeleton that they found when I was listening to the podcast you wanted me to listen to, turned out to be just, dysplasia in a regular old human. It's really tough. But it comes back to, should we trust our government? Should we trust the Air Force? Should we trust the Navy? Are they giving us everything? Clearly, if NORAD can get information out to Canada, but not you guys, I thought you guys were a free nation. You know?
Right.
So for me, I felt like in the article there was a lot of revisiting concepts, a lot of pontificating, which is fine. Ultimately, his sort of end game is the thesis of his thing is, if we, by matter of if by eliminating all other possibilities, we arrive on the idea that there is information, why can't we have it? That's a pretty reasonable thing to put into law for about a lot of things. Crimes, just regular old crimes that are old. You know, I would argue if we've seen our country do MK Ultra, all sorts of experimental aircraft that we know about, why can't we just band together and say, all right, Air Force, we're not interested in UFOs necessarily. We want it all. And then we'll go through it. And that'll be fun.
And that's
they're not terribly interested.
And that's the thrust of what Mellon was saying is, in this particular case, you're talking about an order from Congress. You're talking about Congress ordering the various branches of the military. This isn't ATIP. This isn't Lou Elizondo at a desk and a pen and a telephone. No. This is an order from Congress saying the branches of the military should provide all the information you have on these unknown aerial phenomena. And the one that Mellon points to 3 different times in the article is allegations and stories he's heard that the Air Force has tracks of objects coming from outside the atmosphere, entering the atmosphere, maneuvering, and then re-exiting and heading back out to space. And he's saying there's enough evidence that those sort of things exist that needs to be handed over. So I think your general point of the culture of the military and all that is dead on. I think in this particular case, Mellon isn't saying, share us the information, Air Force. He's saying, Air Force, comply with Congress. Share the information that you've been ordered to share. So the people whose job it is that Congress has appointed to overlook this and to determine what we're dealing with, even if it is mundane explanations or allied technology, it's their job to look at it. And the Air Force has just not said we don't have anything. They just flat have not responded.
It's probably because we give them such a small budget. Wait, no. No, we don't.
Like an F-22 Raptor, right?
Rather, what do you think?
Well, yeah, one thing that surprised me was that the Air Force has all these crazy sensors, the infrasound, the space fence, and it surprised me that doesn't seem like they're sharing data with the other branches of the government, not even just UFO data, just data in general. And I feel like that is kind of a big miss. It seems like we could be more intelligent and have a more comprehensive view of what's going on in our skies if these branches would just share stuff. And then
how often would you ask yourself, rather, isn't there somebody in the government somewhere who has satellites scanning the atmosphere and radars and sonars and infrasound? Somehow, why are we counting on a couple of guys in fighter jets on a Navy ship to pick these things up, or their sonar, Kevin Day or Gary Voorhees to pick this up on their system? Why don't we have a network of these things around the planet looking for missile launches and nuclear rocket launches and other things? Guess what we do? That's the point of his stories. We have this amazing web of technology tracking things down to the size of a quarter to make sure they don't slam into the International Space Station. That technology is tracking things at all sorts of speeds, all sorts of oblique orbits, changing of altitudes, all sorts of situations. And even when you eliminate the most mundane explanations, you eliminate everything, NORAD is still seeing hundreds of tracks a year, hundreds that they classify as unknown. And that's eliminating all of the ones they can. Mellon tells the story of one that was going hypersonic speeds in the 1950s, and it was sending out the "I am a friendly aircraft" signal in the 1950s, going hypersonic, moving erratically. That's what's amazing about these stories, is there clearly something to them.
Yeah, and another question I have is, obviously we'd solve this issue a lot faster if we had the U.S. Air Force giving us all this data. But do you think that that's necessary for us to solve this problem? Because the Navy does have crazy sensors and stuff, right?
I think the problem's solving itself. I think we're in the middle of the problem solving itself. I think we're in the middle of this movement. I think we're in the middle of too many people want the answer. As I've mentioned on this show before, there's an information bubble. Too many people have said, well, the publicly, Mellon said it in his interview. Well, the publicly available information makes me want to limit me conjecturing as to what the explanation could be, because I like to only say things that are based in definable, defendable facts. And a later interview, that was on the debrief interview. A few hours later on the Hill, he said, well, the evidence that I've seen, the ET hypothesis is the one that best fits the evidence. He, Elizondo, many other people have said, members of Congress, Bill Nelson more or less said so, the head of NASA, that he's seen things in these videos and photos that haven't been made public yet. And I think that's really what we're dealing with, is the people that have seen better stuff are saying it's not Russian, it's not Chinese, it's not ours. And they're, I've mentioned this on this show before too. If you go back and watch the documentary, 1956 UFO documentary called UFO, and it was in a time in the early 50s where the U.S. military, primarily the Air Force, was dealing with all these reports of UFOs in the sky. And they actually started with Grudge and Sign and all these programs that evolved into Blue Book. And that is the conclusion of that movie, is the people at the highest levels of military went and checked all of the intelligence sources, their own secret black projects. They essentially did what Mellon did. And they got to the end of it all. And at the end of that movie, he says, if it's not Russian, because they weren't worried about Chinese at that point, and if it's not ours, and he kind of points up to the sky and says, there's only really one explanation left. So if we want to get into these, is it ghosts or transdimensional, any of these other explanations, that's a separate conversation. But I think we've really moved heavily out of the human mundane explanations, at least as far as foreign adversaries. I still think there's a big window open as to whether or not it's American technology. And I think that's part of what Mellon and Elizondo are trying to get at. I think they feel like they've been stonewalled by the Air Force, even back when they were at OSWAP and at ATIP and working together to get to the bottom of this. They've been stonewalled by the Air Force the entire time. And in this article, the way I read it, Mellon talks about the potential of crash retrievals. Now, this is something he's stayed away from for a long time. And when he talks about crash retrievals, he's talking about it within the context of the Air Force not giving up the goods. And if they have that is something they should give up. And again, the implication to me is I've gone as high up the chain as I can go to prove that it's not foreign. And I'm confident in that. I've gone as high up the chain as I can go in the U.S. government to establish it's not ours. And there's still a wall I can't see behind. So I feel like ET's the best answer, but there's this big wall that I have not been able to see behind, and that's the Air Force. Is the implication that the Air Force, this may be secret, at least some of this, maybe secret Air Force craft, something dating back to World War II, something built in the 80s, something, at any different time you want to take it. I think that's the question that Mellon, that's what I see. I see him and Elizondo trying to get to the bottom of this for 15 years, and the one wall they keep slamming into is inside their own government.
And it's usually coming from the Air Force.
Yep.
Well, so there's two things that I want to. The first is that Jazz Shaw on this show months ago talked about how we're going to start hearing congressmen and folks within the intelligence community start to use the word extraterrestrial in the context of that this is an intelligence, a non-human intelligence. And so far we've had Avril Haines, we've had the Indiana representative Carson, Representative Carson. We've now had Christopher Mellon for the first time, I think, has actually used it in that context.
No doubt in my mind.
While in an interview. Before. And what was great about that interview is the three reporters don't know a lot about the topic, and so their questions were pretty surface level. But of course, that surface level curiosity is always going to go to, well, is it extraterrestrial? You're telling us not Russian, it's not Chinese, it's not any sort of American breakthrough technologically speaking. So what other options do we have? Can you say whether or not definitively it's and they're kind of like the hypothesis, the theory has to be put on the table that is a very real possibility. Is that what it is? No, we don't know yet. We just, but it has to be talked about. We have to put the conversation on the table now.
So Mellon talks about the missing deck logs and the missing tapes. He talks about the missing deck logs from the Nimitz incident, the missing radar information from that. And he talks openly in that story about the more than one person saying that Air Force personnel came on and took that information away. So again, we have an organization that's resisting providing information, but at least in two separate cases where information is missing about key incidents, the Nimitz incident and the Princeton incident, in both of those cases, rumors are that Air Force personnel came in and took that information. And Mellon reiterated that in both the interview with the debrief and the interview with the Hill. He brought that point back up.
Yeah. Robin, what were you going to say?
Well, so it's my understanding that the Department of Defense has Plan 8888. I think you're familiar with this. Nope. Shakes of heads.
No, say that again. The AAAA?
8888. 4 8s.
Okay.
Plan. Basically,
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay. Well, it's going to take us off subject for a minute and then get us back on subject.
Go for it.
So the Department of Defense has something called Plan Quadruple 8. And it is an actual dossier that they are privy to that gives you breakdown instructions, or the government breakdown instructions on how to deal with, wait for it, zombies. So the American government has already said, yeah, zombies could be an issue. Let's write a map on that bad boy. Are we certain there is nothing, and you guys know more than me, are we certain there's nothing about alien invasion? Is there a plan for the Department of Defense that has that? And if not, if we're willing to, if some of the government is willing to bet like zombies might happen, I'm sure we can figure out that aliens might happen.
Yeah. Well, I think there have been, we went over an Air Force manual a little while back from the 60s that basically went over this entire thing. Not so much a response to what it would be, but just the idea of where these things come from. Yes, they are real. Here's some examples. This is different forms and what it looks like, how it's been seen, how it's been reported. Sort of a real short synopsis and
handbook.
A handbook essentially.
Yeah.
I think the way I read it is this is a chapter in the book and sort of, hey, here are the answers in case you see one of these things, this is what probably it is. So that way it takes the curiosity and also reiterates sort of the thing that you were talking about earlier, the culture, and to just shut the hell up about it. There was also a section in that chapter of here's what happens to people who report it. They get grounded, they get demoted, they get this. So just pretty much
ridiculed.
Here's the answers, but just shut up about it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I read it, but yeah, no, I mean,
you'll be blacklisted.
You make a wonderful point. If they've made preparations and backup plans for zombies, and I know what you're talking about, I think there have definitely been documents. Chris, maybe you can speak to this, or rather, I don't know the name of the document off the top of my head, but I feel like within the FAA, within that manual, there was definitely a number that you could call. I think that number's been removed, but that was set up by Bigelow, where you could report anomalous objects. We have NARCAP, where pilots can report anonymously what they saw as they were flying commercially, because it provides, and I know this phrase gets used a lot, a safe space for pilots to anonymously submit their UFO reports without doing it through their job, because that could lead to some awkward moments. So I'm wondering, does anybody, Chris, or rather, do you know of any sort of forms or anything like that other than what I just mentioned? No, I don't think so. Right?
So that's absurd. I mean, if we can have the counter zombie dominance plan, and it the April 30th, 2011 document depicts fictional screenings of zombie attacks for training students in military planning. If we can pretend that zombies are real, come on, people. We can pretend that aliens are real. We should probably get ready for that.
Well, I'll say though, the zombies seem like
I'd love to know, of the 144 that we tracked, how many of them were just like we saw them on sensor, or we saw them with our bare eyeballs, or both?
I think
80 of the 144 had sensor data.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I think only one of them, if I'm not mistaken, was solved or figured.
Turns out that one flying zombie.
Finally.
Rather, what is it?
Zombies seem like something that you could actually have a plan for, right? Like it's kind of like an infectious disease. You know, you can do quarantine. Like it might be worth it as a military exercise to see how you'd respond to something like that. I don't even know where you'd begin to form a plan of what happens with an alien invasion, right? Like,
I mean, decentralized cities, hazmat. Obviously, there's going to be, biological warfare if they feel like they want to be evil.
Aliens stop at the Kuiper Belt, grab a big rock, drop it on us, kill everybody.
Probably true. Probably true.
I feel like that would be I think it was the Discovery Channel. Thought of what an alien invasion would look like, and they had 10 scenarios or something like that. And throwing basically a huge rock at the planet was like number one. Look, you want to take over? Like that's a good way to do it. Another one was spreading a flu through like a bird. Was
something we could almost do, Luis. We're sending a probe up called the DART probe to slam into an asteroid to see if we could move the thing out of the way if we had to, if one was coming towards Earth.
Where's Bruce Willis when you need him?
Oh. Yeah, exactly, right? So the idea of going right out there to the Kuiper Belt, grabbing a Kuiper Belt object, or going out just to the asteroid belt on the other side of Jupiter and grabbing an asteroid and strapping a rocket to it and pointing it at Earth and hit and go is something we could almost do ourselves right now.
I figure, though, the turnover time with an apocalypsed Earth, because they're probably here for water, probably. And I feel like if they just dropped the rock, they'd have to wait, a long time for it to be clean.
Hydrogen and oxygen and H2O all throughout the cosmos. Like water is everywhere. Like water is super easy to get. They could grab it out of a Crab Nebula if they wanted.
Maybe they're coming to see some of your stand-up.
Yeah, the only thing that's
more
right,
likely.
Exactly. You know what's interesting about Earth? Us. That's what's interesting. Humans. This transition from an animal to a tool-using animal that can build things, that can manipulate electricity, that can fly, that can go into space, that can do all these things we can do. That's what's interesting about Earth. And I think that's what's interesting to probes or aliens or interdimensional, whoever's here watching. I think that's what's interesting is us.
Rather, what are you going to say?
Yeah, I was just kind of getting back to the Air Force issue. It seems like there's kind of three possibilities there. One is that they are behind it all. It's American tech, Air Force tech. The second one is that they know it's ET tech and they want to keep that secret for their own devices. And the third is that, it's a culture issue, like Robin was saying. I'm curious, Chris, do you think there's any other options there, or is there one that you lean
Well,
towards?
I think, as Luis likes to say, I've heard him say in the past, I think it's some of all of these or part of all of these solutions. But I think there's no doubt, and this has been talked about extensively, that the culture of the Air Force and the pie in the face they took with Blue Book in the 60s created an environment that was passed along through the generations to the point that, yeah, I think there's just a culture in the Air Force of, man, we're up there for real. We've got satellites. We got airplanes. We don't talk about UFOs. That's for children. That's fiction, whatever. So I do think there's just a cultural about that as well. I think Mellon makes a good point in the article about some of the sensors and systems maybe designed to rule out things that don't match what we normally see or what they would expect to see. But a lot of UFO reports are simple, straight-line hypersonic vectors. They're not always abrupt maneuvering and so forth. And I can tell you a lot of those systems are specifically designed to track hypersonic stuff because they've been looking for ICBM launches since the 60s. So a lot of the equipment is built for that. So the idea that it wouldn't be seen into something that's brought up, I think that's really what we're dealing with. Is either really they aren't seeing anything, or their systems are so sophisticated compared to the Navy that they have ruled out more exotic explanations. But you still think they would have information to provide then. If the government is trying to get to the bottom of this and the Navy's going, we got 144 of these cases that don't make sense, and the Air Force is sitting on the answers, and they're like, oh yeah, this one was a flock of birds, that one was a weather inversion, those two were spy planes, and they know, and they're not giving that information up. That it really is just a problem as an American citizen. I think that the likeliest case, and the case that Mellon was trying to make, is they know something. So they either know it's their own system that they've developed in private, and they just feel they don't have to share with anything. And again, as I pointed out, if the deck logs were taken off of the Princeton and the Nimitz, somebody in the chain of command at the Navy that was higher than a Chris Mellon or someone had to give the okay for that helicopter to land on that ship and take those tapes. So if there is an element of the government, the military, allowing the Air Force to operate beyond congressional oversight, it's happening at a level high enough that Chris Mellon can't get to it. And so I think that's a big part of what's going on here, is he's, a rich white guy from a rich white guy family who's worked his way up damn near the top of the government. And he's seeing a level above himself that he can't look into. And the people at that level won't tell him, yeah, we're seeing crazy alien type, we can't explain it stuff either. Or we've got a secret project, it's just none of your effing business. And so I think that's where we're at with that. I think those are the most likely. I think the culture is just an issue that's real. I think the idea that they're not seeing anything or that they've ruled it all out is pretty slim, and not what Chris Mellon or Luis Elizondo seem to think either. And not what Ryan Graves seemed to think when he was speaking to Air Force pilots. They weren't telling him, oh yeah, we know what it is. They're telling him, we don't know what the F we're seeing.
What were you going to say, Ryan?
Well, I don't come from a military background at all. So, if anyone has any more information, please correct me. But it seems to me that it'd be very unlikely that the Air Force would be developing a capability for, decades and keep that entirely secret from the other branches, right? Because it's, they're we all are America, right? And they want to be developing their resources so they has the best, capability of succeeding.
So in the commercial environment, high-tech projects are very siloed, rather. Like high-tech people are very siloed into the very narrow area that they're an expert in. So I don't think that's unrealistic that something again, an anti-gravity technology or some sort of electromagnetic propulsion. Robert Scheuer, who invented the controversial EM drive, has said openly, I think the things that are swarming our ships, the way they fly, the way the gimbal objects moves in the gimbal video, he says that moves exactly like an EM drive would, which is just a form of propellantless propulsion using electromagnetic waves. So the idea that the Air Force could have cracked this one thing, this way to fly without propulsion, and that one technology has been held in reserve. As I tell people all the time, they go, oh, well, we would have used it sooner or later. Why? Why would we have used that technology? We didn't need it in the Gulf War. We dominated. We didn't need it in these recent wars because those wars are about making money. And I won't get into a whole political discussion here, but those have to do with military contracts and making money and protecting oil investments and things like that. We have never needed to pull out the secret weapon since World War II. World War II, we had to pull it out. We had to pull out the atomic bomb and go, here it is, boom, now we own the world. Since then, even in the worst parts of the Cold War, there hasn't necessarily been a conflict zone where we had to employ something of that nature. So I do think, although it's slim, there is a window of possibility that this is a project that goes back for decades. I do think that exists.
In that possibility, do you think it would be, ultimately the president would have to authorize, the use of some secret technology, right? Do you think that it would be, we are in some weird situation and the Air Force commanders would come to the president at that time and say, hey, we have this thing that we could deploy, tell them then, or would they, it seems to me like they know beforehand.
Yeah, so say like in the 60s, probably, say like a president or even the 50s, like an Eisenhower or Lyndon Johnson or some of these people, especially when we were fighting the Vietnam War. I think there's always been a feeling in the UFO community that once you got to a guy like Jimmy Carter, who was a Democrat and an outsider of the military-industrial complex, that maybe sharing got a little grayer at that time. There's always been, and Mellon mentions this in the article, the shuffling off of these projects outside of governmental oversight into private companies that have handshake deals with somebody at the Joint Chiefs of Staff level or somebody who is able to maintain this. So from a legal standpoint, there's no doubt the president should know about it. There literally is no wiggle room in the Constitution that the president shouldn't know as the commander-in-chief if he wants to know every project being worked on at every level. Whether or not that's being shared, we used to think no for a while. Obama seems to like to smirk in a way that he's been told something. And that's, again, just interpreting somebody's look on his face. So, but yeah, I don't know, rather, but I legally, yes, he would have to be informed.
Well, there's one thing that you touched upon. I wanted to mention it earlier, but I wish when Christopher Mellon and Lou do talk to these bigger media outlets, and I have a feeling we're going to start seeing them a lot more even than in years previous. But
I can virtually guarantee that.
Yeah, I think that's coming. But I wish they would emphasize the fact that when they get interviewed on this, look, we're not saying it's this one thing. We're saying it's drones, it's adversarial, it's Chinese, it's Russian, and there's this unknown element, this there's diamond in the rough aspect. I wish they would lump those into one, and like going back to what Robin was saying, so that way we could say, hey, as the American people, give us all of it. And then we'll decide what's interesting in there, like we get to decide because we're the taxpayer,
Yep.
So,
minimum, Luis, our representatives that we elect that ordered that information from the Air Force has the opportunity to look it over. At a minimum, in a representative government where there are security concerns of national security and intelligence, at a minimum, our representatives have the ability to look at that information and make that determination. And that was the thrust of Mellon's piece. He did also mention in the interview on the debrief about the multiple phenomena, multiple sources, including mundane and foreign, and we may be seeing some cutting edge drones as well. And so he kind of left all that out there as well. But yeah, I think you're right. That would be a better if they always included that there, because I do think some of these things the military is seeing sure operate the way a Chinese drone or a Russian drone would operate as far as observing what they're doing. The term Mellon used was swarming Navy ships. He used that multiple times in the article and multiple interviews. Swarming Navy ships. Those are definitely adversarial actions. They're not consistent with, I saw a saucer-shaped ship going in and out of a volcano, or going a triangle going in and out of the water. They're very specifically around military ships engaging in, definitely supervisory sort of ways. They definitely seem to be watching.
Yeah.
Just if I can
please,
I'm just curious, hypothetically, as to get a feel for the room, and those of you listening at home, please type in.
Well, there's
If
200 people watching right now.
Let's imagine the absolute most contact that we might have with extraterrestrials.
Mhm.
We've all seen fake alien autopsies, and we've seen some really good ones. So let's say the government is hiding a great deal from us. Let's say that's true. And they're probably doing it shoddily, because some of this information is obviously getting out. If 10 is, we have some high ups in our government have casual relationships with extraterrestrials, we caught one on the ground at one point, or we shot one down and it exploded and no survivors, to all the way to, we saw something in the sky, might have been a metal balloon, we don't know. What level of privacy do you think that the American government, for example, could hold on to, given that more than one person has to have seen the worst of the worst and the most casual of the casual? And my opinion is humans are often flawed and will loose lips all over the place, right? What do you think is the extreme of what the government might be hiding?
Oh, gosh.
First of all, to your point, we've heard all of those. So around things like Roswell, we have, this coroner's family says he had to get the caskets for the bodies. This secretary says, I saw the bodies. This one says, I was told by President Bush in an airplane. Oh, yeah, these things are real. We have so a lot of what you're saying exists. Right. What doesn't exist is the unverifiable physical proof to go with it. So the loose lips exist. Now, keep in mind, as you pointed out, being humans, we also just tend to make stuff up or misinterpret things or whatever. So the possibility that all of those loose lips are tall tales definitely exists. Right. But to say that the leaks haven't happened is not true. The leaks are there. There are people at every level of this phenomena that have come out, from local people in police stations to people at the FAA to people at all levels, including people bringing physical data with them, like FAA radar tracks and things, saying, these are my experiences. So the leaks are definitely out there. When you get into that narrow area of physically, I'm not talking about alien poop, rather. I'm talking about a physical craft, or I'm talking about alien bodies. When you get into that, I do think you get into a weird area that has a much smaller group of whistleblowers with a lot less credibility. And, you get into scientists who are in love with the theoretical concepts. You get guys like Eric Davis, who love the idea of a multi-dimension that lets them tap energy from all the dimensions to fuel their version of the warp drive. So, of course, this is how alien ships work, because it's popped up in his head. So I think you have all those different aspects to it. So,
I'd say, I definitely agree with what you're saying. Where do I think it is there in the extreme? I don't know. And that's, I think, what our show really emphasizes is we have no clue. Like, we're not here to give anybody answers. The facts for me are there's something in the sky. Our pilots have chased it. We're now making laws to make sure that the information and data collected on these things in the sky is shared with intelligence communities and then eventually filtered to the public. I know that pilots have now gone on record, very credible, highly trained, have dropped bombs on people kind of pilots, are coming out and saying that they've chased these things. So for me, that's where the terra firma is. Anything past that or below it, I'm not really interested in.
I tell my wife I call it the shit flying around hypothesis,
right.
Which is there does appear to be stuff flying around. There does just flat out from sensor systems, radar systems, sonar systems, eyewitness testimonies. There seems to be stuff flying around at speeds, at times in history, and in maneuverability type capabilities that are not consistent with the way we understand flight. So I think the stuff flying around hypothesis is the one, and not surprisingly, the one the government is interested in as well. It's the one the military and the U.S. government has been willing to hang their hat on is, hey, if pilots are seeing stuff flying around like this all the time and sensor systems are picking it up all the time, that's something worth looking at. When you get down to all the levels of the conspiracy or the theories or alien bodies or crop circles, everything below that, I think you just get into what you want to believe or interpret or not. But I think what's indisputable is pilots using sensor systems are seeing stuff fly around that they can't explain, maneuvering in ways they can't explain, going at speeds they can't explain, and seemingly going in and out of the atmosphere, in and out of the ocean. That just seems to be real.
And rather, did you have any thoughts on that, on sort of the question that Robin posed there?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of potentially the perfect storm for all this would be the alien poop scenario where, there may be, I mean, we've seen, there is pretty good evidence that weird things drop from the sky. Liquid metal is dropping from the sky from these unexplained objects. There's at least a half a dozen fairly documented cases of that. But the problem is you recover this stuff and it's just earthly slag, it looks like, just, industrial waste. And so it makes a lot of sense to me that the government might have recovered materials, but they might literally just be hunks of twisted metal that don't look like a craft. You can't prove that they came from outer space. And
it may not be part of the craft either, rather. I mean, think of a can of soda that's ice cold, that's accumulating water on the outside because of condensation, and that water is dripping off of that can. If you went and studied that water, all you'd find is water.
Yeah, you wouldn't find your Dr. Pepper.
Yeah, there would be nothing to indicate that water came from an aluminum can, much less a can containing soda. So I think that's the issue we have. That's why I have the issue with the alien poop and the discarded materials thing is, with a crash craft, there's pieces. With these crafts, and usually they're like the Rendell. I mean, I don't want to get into the weeds since Robin here isn't this deep into the weeds with us, but a lot of the stories that involve like stuff coming off of the ships often are the stories I find the hardest to believe for other reasons.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm not as confident as that. Like I said, I'm more confident on the stuff flying around. Stuff falling off of it, I'm not as confident on.
Well, maybe
and I'd agree with that. But I would say that stuff falling off of it, I would be more confident than actual recovered craft.
Yeah, the thing, people point this out all the time. I'm not going to be the first one to say this, but think about the probes we have, right? So we have probes right now all throughout our solar system at different stages. We have things on Mars rolling around. We have stuff headed for Venus. We have stuff in the outer planets. We have stuff zooming around Saturn. We have all kinds of stuff zooming around. And a lot of it pretty regularly crashes. Now, it crashes because we crash it. Sometimes we crash it into a planet to get ejector or test something. The Mars helicopter almost crashed, but it didn't, But we have these sort of disposable probes. And this has been my argument and my most fervent argument, that aside from a secret Air Force program, which I still think are that type of program, is when you get into the idea of probes coming here, suddenly something crashing isn't as crazy as if aliens got in a ship and flew here from another planet. then yes, I would think that ship crashing would be highly unlikely. But I think you send a bunch of von Neumann probes here, or probes from multiple civilizations within the galaxy are here, and some of them crashing just doesn't seem that far-fetched to me.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. There's another angle to this, though, is what's the possibility that a technology created by a ET civilization that we'd even be able to identify it as technology?
Yeah, you know, I'm a three-dimensional guy. I live in a three-dimensional world, so I've always said I'm a nuts and bolts guy when it comes to the ET. And you know, you think of the sensor systems, the way we can trick sensors with stealth technology or make it hard for our systems to be observed. Or I've written about stealth technologies blocking light and blocking all kinds of other things that are in development. So do I think there's a technological way for a very advanced civilization to create probes that we just can't see? It doesn't seem impossible. I mean, the technology exists for us to do some of that already. So if you extrapolate 1,000 years or 10,000 years or whatever, as far as it just being so exotic in nature that we can't see it, you know, I think there's an argument for microscopic von Neumann probes. If you were going to send probes across the galaxy, and size matters when it comes to material and energy and travel, and you can engineer really complex things at a very small size, it's altogether possible that probes are here and they're just too small for us to see them unless we get them under a microscope.
Event Time with $5 donation said it's not absurd to think that a probe could be engineered to self-destruct if observed / detected, which I think is an interesting idea. And guys, we have your
especially
super
like
chats
an
here.
Imperial probe droid.
There you go. We're saving your guys super chats, questions, and stuff for the end. So don't worry, we'll get to them.
I noticed that the cola can that you were talking about was Dr. Pepper. So I'd like to take this time to thank our sponsor, Dr. Pepper.
That's right.
He's not a real doctor, but he's more of a doctor than you are at home.
That's right.
Way better than Mr. Pibb.
He's a pepper. You're a pepper.
Oh,
we're a
well,
pepper.
here's actually what I was going to say, because I wanted to kind of do a light reset. Chris, you've been on this show many times. I think everyone, for the most part, in the chat is familiar with who you are. But I wanted to, Robin, just give you another chance to just sort of introduce yourself to our audience and share with them your brain working power. I think what did you say it was? I messed up the quote there, but yeah, share us how your brain works.
Me old brain working power.
Yeah, the old brain
That's
working
what I
power.
was thinking. That's
Tell us your degrees, because then I got a follow-up question for you.
Sure. So I have 2 degrees, a Bachelor of Fine Arts and a Bachelor in Psychology from the University of Victoria. After I finished my 2 bachelors, I taught there as a sessional for 2 years, and then I ran the largest halfway house in the world for 5 years before I came to Los Angeles. It's a 40-bed contract with correction services, where by law I have to have enhanced reliability screening. So I'm also certified federal drug and alcohol counselor. My focuses in my psychology degree were primatology. That's the study of us big old apes. And a focus on neurofunction, so neurochemicals, neurostructure, things like that. The way my brain works, well, an impulse gets created in my limbic system, and it goes to my frontal lobe, and then So I mean, I as far as this subject is concerned, I always come back to the Fermi paradox, which I'm certain all 3 of you are fully aware of. Mm-hmm. And so while I have had an experience with an unidentified flying object, or now it's the UAP, at no point would I deign to say that's definitely an alien, because I didn't meet the guy. So mathematically, it's just very improbable that there aren't other life forms in our universe. And yet, with the exception of possibly probes, we have no physical evidence. So there's got to be a reason for that. Either they're dead already, either they can't reach us, either they don't want to reach us. Or, I mean, have you seen Florida? Sorry to our Florida people.
I'm from Florida.
Yeah. I know.
What are you doing over here, man? What are you doing? Now this show makes total sense. So the reason why I wanted you to share that again, and can I brag about you a little bit?
If you like.
Sure. So I met Robin on the set of an independent film that was produced, directed, and written not only by Robin, but by the Levy brothers and also Scott Thompson from Kids in the Hall. And as we were filming that, Robin and I, of course, were having very good conversations. And then we went to an award show. And then that's when we had our first like political conversation. I was like, this guy is cool. This guy, I could mess with this guy. And so since then we've loosely kept in touch and then sort of reconnected here within the last year on such a wonderful level. So, Robin is also a phenomenal improviser. He improvises, with Joel Murray and Friends, which is an improv troupe out here in Los Angeles. Bill Murray's brother, which is awesome. The show's amazing. So I've, through Robin, I've had some really fun experiences and memorable moments. So I just wanted to say that real quick. So, we hope to see him more often here on the show going forward. But what I was going to ask you is your work as a drug counselor and as someone who's dealt with the human psyche a lot. I'm curious to think, like, what is your clinical, I guess, diagnosis, if you could? And I know you haven't read into a lot of these cases, but like, what do you think of these highly trained pilots who've had all these tests and all of this training and all of this, I guess if you want to call it credibility. I think the fisherman is just as credible as the Air Force pilot. But of course, in society, we're going to look at those two things differently. But I'm curious to know, like, do you think humans are having a psychosis when it comes to this? Do you think it's something that the brain,
meaning a mass psychosis?
Yeah, mass psychosis, or just something that, for whatever reason, in some humans, you manifest these sightings or these experiences. What would be your best guess? Do you think that there's something to it, or do you think humans are just kind of flawed in this weird way that we haven't figured out?
Well, the difficult answer is, as far as psychosocially and cognitively, there are lots of reasons that someone might make it up. It's possible, right? Ego, I need attention. I want a book. I want to write a book. This is a subject that no one can hassle me on because of my own experience. And if it sounds good, then I'll be rich. I think that's very rare. But as far as like, if you can write a book, you're probably not just looking for that sweet UFO money. Right. But it's possible. It's very possible. As far as mass psychosis, hard to define, given that communication it has become so prevalent. Digital communication has become so prevalent in our society. It's very easy for a quote global phenomena to happen because you've got a set of friends and they've got a set of friends, and all of a sudden we saw a comet over Russia and we decided that's a UFO. We all saw it, UFO, and boom. And then the government goes, yeah, it was a comet. And you all go, no. So that's possible as far as a mass psychosis goes. There are a lot of schools of thought on that, specifically the Greys, that it is a form of memory of when you were born. It's not terribly well thought out, but given that when you're born, the doctor has a mask on, big eyes, white, lights, it's your first experience, it's very traumatic. There are some people that say you are reliving those experiences when you get abducted. It feels like that. As far as pilots go, well, especially in the 60s and the 70s, you weren't allowed to join the Air Force if you had done hallucinogens. So that'd be acid and marijuana and mescaline and things like that. And the premise was that if you were flying all of a sudden, and let's say you did a spinny move, some of those chemicals would get released and you would be at risk of damaging a very large plane. Oh, and your life, which probably was second on their on their agenda.
Right.
Now, can you have acid flashbacks? Yeah, it's possible. It's hard to do, but it's possible. And can it create temporary psychosis? It's hard to do, but yeah. But I think you'll recall in the, well, you won't recall the 60s, but maybe the 70s, the ability to test for drugs and the ability to understand a person's drug history was limited at best. And if you smoked weed 5 days ago and you rolled into the recruitment center and said, yeah, good to go. You smoke weed? Nope. All right, put your boots on. See you later. So yeah, there's probably lots of times where if my guys in the prison system could literally hollow out something that looked an awful lot like what it was supposed to look like and put a bag tucked under their knee and get a sample from someone else and squeeze it. And there are lots of ways to fake urine tests, even ways to fake blood tests. So I'm willing to bet there's a lot of pilots in the 60s and 70s that did roll up there kind of like, hey, and probably found some marijuana or some hallucinogens in Korea or Vietnam, etc. So as far as medical, and then there's the whole zero-G thing, right? When you're putting that much pressure on your brain, almost like a concussion to a certain degree, where you pass out,
right?
You wake up, those kinds of things. You're compressing your basal ganglia, your limbic system, your everything. Your occipital lobe is just being forced in. You're probably going to see stars, all sorts of stuff. So, yeah, lots of possibilities. But I would also argue that a lot of these pilots that we're hearing, who, for better or for worse, we trust them more than the fishermen, they do have a pretty reliable record. And at some point, you have to either say, okay, they've got a brain tumor or they're suffering some form of dementia, or they did see something. And again, shit's flying around theory, that holds up. They saw something. Is it the aliens from The Simpsons? Probably not. But you saw something. So medically, I would offer that as far as all the different reasons that a psyche might fake it or truly believe that they saw something. It's
something
plausible.
else interesting along these lines to keep in mind, Luis.
Yeah.
If you think of alien abduction experiences, for instance, right? And then read about DMT experiences. I don't know if you've ever read or just Google DMT aliens.
Yeah.
And what you will find is about a third of people that regularly use DMT recreationally have these experiences where they meet others. They meet beings that are often described pretty similarly to an alien abduction, alien scenario. And sometimes they're like angels that guide them or guiding spirits. Other times they are frightening, but typically it's more of a positive experience. And it's also important to note that the brain produces DMT naturally. And it typically, although we're not super certain on all the scenarios, it seems to align with high stress situations. So there's definitely an argument to be said that at least some alien abduction or alien observation situations are things that the person firmly believes because it did occur to them. But what happened was their brain kicked out a little extra DMT and they just had an alien hallucination experience that was chemical. And the brain is so complex. I mean, Tim McMillan over at The Debrief is a cognitive science. That's what his degree's in. and he and I talk about this constantly. And there's a huge psychological component that, as Robin pointed out, just cannot be discounted across the board. I think that's why it's lived where it's lived for so long, the phenomenon, and why the military getting involved with things like sensor data, radar data, things like that has been this big flip of the switch. It's been this big, it's not just people seeing things. It's technological systems picking up things coincidental and concurrent with people seeing them. So it's possible David Fravor hallucinated the Tic Tac, but it's highly improbable that his co-pilot, Alex Dietrich, her co-pilot, and all the sensor systems that picks up the Tic Tac hallucinated that.
Right.
I mean, going all the way back to the 1700s, there are paintings of like the succubus that sits on your chest while you're sleeping, right?
Right.
And I think most psychological experts will agree this is night terrors. This is sleep paralysis. This is what you experience, and it's a physical problem. And it's really easy, especially if you're bleary-eyed and half-cut, that you decide, well, this isn't me. My body's screwing up. This is aliens, and look, I can see them all. But the majority, the evidence of a physical nature, as far as data from scans, etc., it starts to eliminate that being the only possibility.
Right.
One of my favorite facts to bring up, Luis, and I brought it up on Mike's show one other time. There was a big meta study where they looked at data from young unwed mothers, and they had all these various questions in the questionnaires, and this was across tens of thousands of young women. And one of the questions was, how often do you engage in sexual activity? And the answer was once a day, once a week, semi-regularly, or the last option was, I have never had sex in my life. 1 in 250 pregnant young women marked that box. So either 4 out of every 1,000 pregnancies is immaculate conception, or those women were lying. So
they don't need to be lying. They could have.
It's important to note that when you're dealing with the human factor, you should expect. It would be weird if we didn't have people making up alien experiences. It would be weird if we didn't have people making a lot of this stuff up. That would be unusual.
What were you going to say, rather?
Well, yeah, I mean, they wouldn't have to be making it up. They could have just, have their own believed experience that they, for whatever reason, isn't accurate, right? Yeah. And I think that the whole issue of hallucinations and other mental modes is interesting in of itself too, right? Like maybe there is some alternate reality to DMT trips and the places our mind goes when our brain synthesizes that stuff. Like that's a fascinating realm of investigation in of itself, I think.
Well, there's a lot of dovetailing
argument. Yeah,
I think there's a lot of dovetailing going on with the paranormal communities, or just communities like you who are just like, let's find out what's really going on. We have no bias. We just want to figure out what it is. Dovetailing into quantum physics. Yep. A lot of that. I've done my best to keep up with quantum physics, but when you consider you can split up a quark and put one on one side of the globe and one on the other, move the half, and the other moves at the exact same time. We're getting into time travel. We're getting into how do those two responses function?
Spooky action at a distance.
Yeah. So, given that we are a blip on this planet's lifespan, literally a blip, I think that we're going to find a lot of let's, for argument's sake, say that these are extraterrestrial crafts or probes or whatever it is. Let's hope they've already figured out how to manipulate quantum physics to a point where we would probably not even know what they were doing. And to me, that's a perfectly reasonable explanation for why these phenomenon could in fact appear and disappear, because you're not dealing with your drop down, drag out physics. You're dealing with a sub layer of the microcosm that functions completely differently.
Well, okay, so real quick, let's swing it over to we've got some super chats and some questions in here. Matthew Rye with a $5 donation says, what toy company? I mentioned that you make toys, but is it a company officially? I know you're like, do you want to talk about, can you talk about any of this?
I can talk about it in veiled secrecy.
Okay.
Basically, I've never made toys in my life. And basically a group of people who are famous and have been given a huge opportunity on national television. Again, they've been given a huge opportunity. And at the last moment, I sort of was chit-chatting with them. I've worked with them for a long period of time. And I said, so have you guys ever had toys? And they said, no. I said, do you still own all your characters? He said, yeah. I said, well, you guys should probably do that. And they went, yeah, Robin, you should do it. I went, me, I don't know how to, what do you do? So in about 72 hours, I figured out how to make toys. So I'm not allowed to talk about it yet because it's obviously hush-hush. But, you know, we make a lot of other funky stuff. The Etsy that you can look up if you're interested in the products that we do have for sale is Curiosities by Thomas. And feel free to put in orders now and get used to them.
Yeah, well, do me a favor. Send me that, or if you could look that up, we'll put the link in the description, and we'll also put it in the chat for you guys if you guys want to go check that out. J. Allen Heineken says Canadians hate our freedom. That's right. Dan James, and I think this is a question for you, Chris. Says, yep. Do you think it's just coincidence that NASA is in the process of consulting 24 theologians on how ET might contact
an old report
humanity?
It was like a decade ago, and it was an old report. And I think it's, you know, if anything, I thought what was more interesting is the DNI Avril Haines and the head of NASA, Bill Nelson, appearing on the same stage with high-profile theologians at the Washington National Cathedral event. And what I found so interesting was that the theologians in that situation, there was a cardinal there, and I forget who the other guy was. Maybe he was just an ordained priest. But they were there talking about it, and they both more or less said what something Robin said earlier, which is the opinion that life is probably common throughout the universe is a big shift. That even as religious people, that was what they were saying is, yeah, it's probably common everywhere, and they were just down to the Fermi paradox that, you know, could it be here? Has it made its way here? Is the space distances and the fact that we're not seeing it? So as I pointed out at the time when I wrote an article about that event, I said what I found interesting was that Avril Haines and Bill Nelson were the ones to bring up ET when talking about the military pilots and talking about their experiences and the Tic Tac and some of these other videos. And it was the theologians who kept trying to bring it back to, well, you know, it's not as, maybe not what we're seeing in the skies here, ET, but, you know, it could be on other planets. And as I pointed out in that article, that is consistent because, as I've always said, if life is ubiquitous, if life is across numerous systems, and the universe is 10 billion years older than the planet Earth, then there's a really good chance that some of that life has had a chance to evolve and become sentient life. And some of that has become technological like us. And a good portion of it has probably happened before us. And the only guys who were uncomfortable with that were the theologians. I said, well, that makes sense because to believe in my version, you would have to believe in evolution. So.
And who's our, is it Io? Is the water moon Io off of Jupiter the one that we think there might be?
I think that's the Improv Olympics Theater that just got closed in LA. Very depressing.
No, but it wasn't Titan. It was the one with
Europa. There's a lot of
Europa. I
potential.
think it was Europa. That's, I think, what people have posited is the closest, possibly, there are life forms underneath that ice sheet that are different.
There's a couple of icy moons that are in that category, Europa and Io, and I think Ganymede maybe.
Right.
And
they're also positing
because they're blocks of ice with a subsurface ocean. So we know there's an ocean underneath there. And in one of the cases, I think it's Ganymede, which is one of Jupiter's moons, it shoots these plumes of spray from the South Pole into space. Now, they don't know if that's coming from like a slushy area between the shell and the ocean, or if it's actually the water coming from the ocean. If it's water coming from the ocean, there are a couple of different proposed missions by NASA to just fly a probe through that spray and capture some of it and bring it back home and look in the spray and go, hey, are there little microscopic things in here?
It's probably just
one scientist at NASA has said they expect complex things like squids and octopuses and things of that nature to appear in some of these subsurface oceans.
Well, I assume that plume of water, I can let you in on a little secret. It's actually a few of us Canadians, we went ice fishing up there.
Yes, right.
Years ago. So that's fine. And I've heard this posit that cephalopods don't share enough of our sort of traits to be considered not maybe alien.
It's more an evolutionary issue, right? So they developed these really complex eyes way too fast. They developed a bunch of other complex neurological systems and things. So when you look at where there's a science paper, and I wrote about this at the brief a couple of weeks ago, making a very solid scientific argument that squids, octopi, octopuses, other cephalopods came down as seedlings in interstellar matter, seeded the oceans, and eventually evolved into those organisms. So there is a really, it's interesting, there's no hard data behind it, but there's really good science behind the idea for it. So that's out there.
Case for Infinity says Bradley is a zombie skeptic. Want to say thank you to Cat1137 as a new member. Thank you, Cat, for becoming a YouTuber.
Thank you, Cat.
Really appreciate it. Woo! Thank you. Eventide with a $5 donation says it's not we already read this one. Sorry, Eventide, you got your question almost read twice, but thank you for the donation. Naive Essence, Chris, what type of civilization do you hypothesize the phenomenon could be? Type 1, Type 2, Type 3? And this is in reference to, I guess, Michio Kaku's scale of as far as where we are right now, a Type 0 according to Kaku, go on the verge of going to Type 1.
Yeah, so Type 1 would be like having a Dyson swarm. So you wouldn't have a full-blown sphere around the star, but a Dyson swarm. So you've essentially able to manage all the energy of your home planet, and then you're able to harvest up to I think it's 20% of the solar energy from your sun makes you Type 1. I forget the exact numbers. This is what I always find to be one of the most exciting things about the phenomenon. And when guys like Elizondo and Mellon, or rather be Squidding, say multiple phenomena from multiple origins, right? When we think of that, that's one of the things. I don't think of it as aliens from Zeta Reticuli in a little ship are coming here and watching us. I think of it as civilizations across our galaxy and maybe even in other galaxies. When you get to traveling between galaxies, you get into a whole other area of mathematics and physics. But within the galaxy itself, because of the time scale, because that we're a little over 4 billion years old, but the galaxy is almost 14 billion years old, 13.7 or so, 13.8. There's all this time for multiple societies to develop. And I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if the ones that crash are somebody who's just a few hundred years more advanced than us. They've just gotten to the point to shooting off, von Neumann probes or very fundamental probes. And then some of this stuff is from a much more advanced civilizations who's maybe tens of thousands or millions of years. And then a number of papers have been written. And one, a Yale physicist, she wrote a whole published peer-reviewed paper about the idea of sentient, artificially intelligent essentially immortal 100 million year old AI robots coming here. And it's we are so new to space, right? We wouldn't even fly off the ground until 1906, right? So we're so new to space. We're so new to that big cosmos and to what's out there that I think the same way we keep transdimensionals or interdimensionals and supernatural experiences and all these other ones on the table for lack of information, I think the idea of multiple visitors from multiple origins makes more sense, at least theoretically. Now, again, there are time issues, there are great filter issues. Societies could have come and gone, that maybe we live at the butt end edge of the galaxy at just the worst period of time, and everyone died off before us, or everyone's coming after us. All of those questions are still open too. But I think that more than likely, if we are seeing something not from this planet, and it is three-dimensional, meaning operating in our dimension of 4 dimensions of length, width, height, and time, that I think those are multiple origins.
Okay. You keep that 4th dimension out of your mouth, Mr. I'm
That's
only
right.
3D.
That's right.
Real quick, people were asking where they can find this join button to become a member. And when you go to the channel, you'll see it says join right here in the right next to. So should be there, or if not, right underneath
it's
the
next
video.
Next to your 2 blue buttons.
Should be something that says join somewhere. So if you guys can't find it, that's where it's at. Okay.
Command FJOIN, you'll find it.
Command FJOIN. There you go. So check that out. And we do have a couple new members who actually just signed up right now. So appreciate it. Let's say thank you to Mr. Matthew Riot and Sparky Lady. Thank you guys for joining. Truly appreciate it.
Rather, you were called a zombie skeptic, and you did not respond to that.
Yeah, what do you?
I've been called many things.
Well, Rather's used to. So Rather's a tough guy on this show.
Didn't Rather say that he thought it was very reasonable, and that maybe even the idea of like a mass illness or something, that it was at least reasonable to have preparations in place for it. So I hate to tell you, I didn't see Rather as a zombie skeptic. I saw Rather as like zombie curious.
Right.
I think it's possible as far as Armageddon scenarios go.
Yes.
Well, Debug for $5 says you guys aren't fooling anyone. We all know Rather is a sleeper agent.
and then he sleeps a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Sparky Lady says, Rather, we sent you something in your P.O. box. Have you checked it lately?
I have
anthrax.
Yeah. Have not checked it since a couple of days ago, but I'll check it out. Thank you.
Check it out. Real quick, before we get on to the next thing, I also wanted to say we took a poll today, and this will sort of segue us into what we're going to be talking about next. Hold on a second. I'm looking. There it is. There's the poll to come up. So the poll was, what's your favorite moment from the last week? And the choices were coming in last place with 18%. Green Street is going to Skinwalker Ranch. I don't know if you guys heard this, but Stephen Greenstreet and Brandon Fugel over the weekend hooked up. And so Stephen Greenstreet is a reporter from the New York Post, and he does a show for them. Really, really great researcher. Gets a lot of flack. Well, it deserves flack because he's very
open-minded,
aggressive with his theories on what these could be, and a big theory for him is that people are seeing drones a lot of these cases, which I happen to agree with. But he's also believes that there's something else to this, just like we discussed earlier. So he's going to this ranch called Skinwalker Ranch. Not sure if you've heard of it, but this
I have. My understanding is that they have monsters on it that are sort of bent backwards.
Yeah, that's
Dino beavers.
Perfect. Dino beavers is another thing people see on this ranch. Dino beavers, portals. People claim to come home with like what they call a hitchhiker effect, where you go almost like a Havana syndrome type thing, where you go home and you feel sick, and in some cases even spouses get it that didn't even go to the ranch. At least those are what the claims are. But anyway, Green Street's going to Skinwalker ranch. So that should be just an interesting, fun
hilarity will ensue.
Exactly, which is funny that came in last place.
Put it, Robin.
The next thing in third place was the Sprague interview with Lou and Chris with 23% of the vote.
Yeah.
Coming in second place, actually tied for first place, is the Mellon article on the debrief with 29%, and the Lex Fridman and Gary Nolan interview with now 30% of the vote. So Lex Fridman and Gary Nolan just still beating out by 1% the article on the debrief. So that's pretty good.
That is really good. What did they talk about? You sent me the clip, Luis. What did they talk about?
Oh, Chris, you're so lazy.
So lazy. Well, that's okay.
He sent it to me like an hour before the effing show, right?
To be fair. I just figured,
I just learned from the poll it happened last week.
To be fair, I think the only person I sent it to with any sort of time that even maybe listened to it was Robin, and I sent it to him early this morning. And then you two guys, I just figured you would have seen it, or at least heard about it. But
I watched like the first minute, and that
I will tell you
was such a bore.
Oh my God, you guys!
But he had like 100,000 views. I was like, it must be a good interview.
I think the best interview that I've heard, not only this year, but maybe even from last year. It's that good. It's that
I
good.
heard the Chris Plain Warp Bubble interview on Singularity Lab last year was pretty
impressive.
That was came in December, right at the end of the year.
But oh my God. Oh man.
Look at how great that interview
I feel like I have to
about it.
I feel like I have
joy.
I feel like I have to fill in Robin on what happened, but
no, who cares, Robin? I wrote a big story, it went big, it fucked up, who cares? That's it.
First time for everything.
Yeah.
Okay, million people read the story. Doesn't matter. Piece of garbage.
Okay, so PhD professor from Stanford, who's got an entire wing named after him. Very, very prolific professor on the university. Gary Nolan had a sit-down interview with Lex Fridman, and it was about an hour, almost 2 hours.
About an hour 45.
Hour 45. They talked about a lot of things, in particularly alien civilizations, UFO encounters, the Atacama skeleton, which Robin mentioned earlier. That's the thing that Stephen Greer found, that we found out, in his opinion, is dysplasia. UFO materials, Jacques Vallée, UFO data, alien hardware in U.S. possession, Bob Lazar, Avi Loeb, and Oumuamua, advice for young people, and, of course, the meaning of life. I don't even know where to begin. I guess I'll start with you, Robin, because you actually watched it. Thank you very much for doing your homework. I'm kidding. What were just, because again, you're sort of the, I guess, the normie in the group. You don't really follow this topic again as fiercely as the three other people in the room. So, what were your takeaways from this interview?
Overall, I would say that it was a really pleasant discourse. Neither of them were, trying to like talk the other one out, or just trying to get on a soapbox. It was a really fascinating and casual, almost, exchange of ideas with an expert and a host. And Chris, the first minute, I'm not surprised you found them a little boring, because they have that NPR feel to them. That like, oh, this is sleep medication. Okay, got it. But I got all the way through it, and yeah, you're right. They did really just let themselves float through a lot of concepts. It was all on, point, but you were like, okay, we're leaving that and we're moving on to something else. Yeah. I have a couple criticisms, but
what are they?
Well, one of the things that they kept coming back to was the organizational relationship that they were hypothesizing. And they made many comparisons between, like, if aliens showed up, it would be like we were ants. And so when we try to make ants do things, it's really hard because we don't know what they're tweeting about or what they're into.
Right.
And while that's, to my mind, that's oversimplifying it to such a degree.
Yeah.
Our
We know
interaction
quite
with
a bit about how ants communicate, by the way.
Sure. Sensory includes smell, bioelectrics, you name it, depending on the colony, really.
Yep.
But they
Vibration,
kept
everything.
They kept sort of harping on this idea as like, well, we don't know about it because we're the ants. And the societal differences and the brain structure differences between you and an ant are pretty vast. And so I felt it was doing a disservice to the community to constantly refer to like, we're ants, because we're not. We're just not that way. If we worked like ants, we would already be in space. Like, if we were that loyal to each other, I mean, we'd be woo. But we're a messy group of primates, and we've pretty much just got two functions.
I do like the idea, though, of this idea of, well, how does we are advanced, correct? Fair to say, human species
comparatively
advanced. Okay, comparatively. I do like the idea of, well, how would we get a pack of ants to do what we want, build up Starbucks or whatever?
Sure.
Which I think we could construct them to do. They could probably, I think if we
threaten them with humiliation,
right? Well, I guess the idea of it's hard to communicate because the intelligence difference is so vast that it is like comparing this, whatever this entity is, as to us. Like, they don't know how to do it, so they're sending probes, they're sending pheromones, they're dropping crumbs here and there to sort of to see how the colony reacts. But I agree with you in the sense that it's an oversimplification. We're not ants. It's an oversimplification. I agree. It is, but I think the vastness of the intelligence could be as extreme as the difference between an ant and a human. And how would you, but in different ways, and how would you communicate with something like that? Could you even, is it even possible? Because again, I mean, we go to the dolphin theory that Jazz loves to talk about, but I mean, we've studied dolphins and we've tried to learn how they communicate, and we have no clue, zero, on how they do that.
Sure. Well, I mean, I would say sure. When we see an ant colony, we're a kid, right? We see a line of ants walking along the ground, and we think, all right, I'm young and I don't understand how this works. I'm going to take a stick and I'm going to put it in their way. Right. I've interacted with them on some level, right? This is an obstacle that I've created that they go around, and this is power for me. I go, okay, one more stick. Now they have to go over that. They're more akin to ants, for example. They're more akin to biological robots, in that respect. When you consider how unnecessarily large our brains have become, that our senses are hugely complex as far as just our five senses, but also we have a gut feeling. We have, we have dreams. We have all these different kinds of interactions with our brain. I'm willing to bet that any species that went through that kind of evolution and is, let's say, way smarter than us, just like miles and miles ahead, they're not going to forget how to put a log in front of us and make us deal with it. I get that part, but they wouldn't do that. They would. My suspicion is that if these extraterrestrials decided to interact with us, communicate with us, the opportunities would be many and varied. Music, right, dreams. It would be like, hey, we're coming. Just so you know, it would be a worldwide phenomenon.
Right.
So I was a little uncomfortable with just the oversimplification of it.
Yeah.
Well, go
ahead. Sorry.
The second part of it.
Well, actually, no. Let me cut you off. Matt Ryan said, and I think this is an epiphany. It is an alien ant farm.
Hi-oh.
Oh my god, my head just exploded. But yeah, go on. I'm sorry.
Second, they spent a lot of time on the basal ganglia, which is part of the brain that sort of watches over your executive functions, right? And they talked a little bit about how not what's the word, not susceptible it was, but just that we know so very little about it.
Right.
And they talked a lot about that. And fine, we don't know nearly enough about the brain. We don't know enough about the marinara trench, where all that
The
dipping sauce
marinara
is.
trench.
Dipping sauce.
That's right.
For your mozzarella sticks.
For the giant cargo mozzarella ships.
So I felt like, sure, we can but we can spend a lot of time talking about the basal ganglia, but our interaction with extraterrestrials, whether it be in our fake, where we're just thinking it up, or whether it's real, you've got to look at a full brain approach. You can't just be like, it's probably the basal ganglia. And those are my only two problems. Otherwise, very interesting discourse.
Yeah, I mean, sort of my takeaway from it essentially I agree with those criticisms of the interview as well. But the thing I took away from it is they were kind of repeating a lot of the same things we've said on this show, primarily like we have to be patient with the political process when it comes to this. We have to take all things into account and look at, like when he was talking about Jacques Vallée and how Jacques Vallée constantly reminds himself, and also to a point where it was annoying, reminding Gary Nolan that the data doesn't lie. Don't jump to conclusions, because we as humans just love jumping to conclusions. That's our thing. We get the data and then we go, okay, this is what it must be. Don't do that. Stop.
Don't tell the
that.
CDC you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So that was one of the takeaways. This idea, like what he talked about, Bob Lazar. He doesn't believe Bob Lazar, and the people that are in his circles don't believe Bob Lazar. But the positive thing about Bob Lazar is that he sort of sucks people into the discussion. It's fun and it's intriguing enough where people, that's like their first taste of the drug that is UAP. And so in a way it's valuable. And this idea of, letting science, giving them the permission to talk about this, and safety in numbers, and how when he goes to dinner parties or he goes to Christmas parties or family functions, inevitably, or even not even personal functions, but dinners organized by universities where everybody at the table is a PhD, and the conversation is elevated to such point. And so when they get in these scenarios, inevitably this conversation always comes up all the time. And every time this conversation comes up, either one of two things happens, he says. Either A, somebody at the table says either they've seen something or they know something of somebody that they trust. And immediately the tone at the table shifts, and it's no longer a something to make fun of or ridicule. And that's the first thing that happens. He says the other thing that happens is once the dinner is done, somebody will come up to me after the dinner and say, hey, I normally don't talk about this, but I wanted to just bounce this off of you. And so this idea that there's safety in numbers, and giving science the permission to talk about this, and he didn't call him out by name, but I felt like he was referencing Neil deGrasse Tyson with this idea of, how dare you be so close-minded on this? You in your refusal to even consider this is becoming dogmatic, and you're going into a place that is dangerous for scientists. And and also the thing I love that he said that really resonated was, if I could tell you how many times a tenured professor or somebody above me that I had respect for said, don't talk about this, it's going to ruin your career, how wrong they were and how this topic has enhanced his career. And this idea
This
of
is Gary Nolan that said this, Luis.
Gary Nolan who said this, and this idea of transparency and well, Lex Fridman was more of the idea of encouraging our representatives and our scientists to be more transparent and having these discussions, because if we can get science talking about this, then that means we're giving them permission to think about how it could work.
Yep.
And so I think, in my opinion, this conversation is a paradigm shift in the discussion, and where science is here. It's here. Like the day of conjecture, all of the stories, all of that stuff is fun, but it's not provable in a science setting. Science needs data. They need to be able to, and I love me also said, he doesn't look at the history of this. Like, he doesn't want to read reports. That's not what he's good at. Like, he's good at collecting data on the human brain, like, and deciphering that. And so, this topic is going to need science and all of its different perspectives and specialties to look at it and just have the conversation. Let's have the conversation. And so I cannot recommend everyone enough to go look and check out this interview. It is phenomenal. I'm going to go back and re-listen to it again. I think that's how good it was. So yeah, Chris, do me a favor, give it a chance, because it is a really, really, really wonderful conversation. And for me, it's a beautiful window into where this conversation is going, not only scientifically, but politically. And how those two things are hand in hand.
As a guy who talks to scientists all the time, I've said this on your show, I think, once before, but my favorite part about writing science at the debrief is because I live in that nexus, right? The debrief covers UFOs. It's 5% of what we write about, but there aren't many sites that publish as much mainstream scientific information as we do that still will cover this topic this way. And because of that unique position, my job has me regularly talking to people like Gary Nolan or scientists at NASA, people at top universities, people working for General Electric or these big corporations that are scientists. And when they find out I'm interviewing them for the debrief, you know what they want to talk to me about? UFOs.
Yeah.
And I think the point you're making, and I haven't even listened to the interview yet, but when you sent me that clip and I was trying to get around to listening to it, the biggest thing I took away without hearing a word was Stanford University.
Yeah.
I looked at that and I said, we're in a world now. When I was a kid, it was Stanton Friedman and nobody. There was one scientist who was a rocket scientist, right? He wasn't a PhD. He was a master's in engineering. He was a rocket scientist, but he would talk about it openly. Now it is just de rigueur. I hear scientists talking about this, and like I said, they ask me privately, and they like to do with me exactly what they did with him. Is they like to come up to me. We'll have an interview, and they will tell me at the end of the interview, "Hey, can you turn off the recording? I want to tell you something."
Yeah.
And a lot of those stories will chill you, man. I mean, there's stuff we hear on Ryan's show or your show, their encounters, but these are professors. These are people older than me that have tenured in their job at top universities, big corporations. And they'll say, "Hey, let me tell you what me and my wife and my daughter saw when we were on a trip. Let me tell you what I saw when I was flying my own airplane. Let me tell you some of these stories." And the taboo is melting away. That is if anything has been serviced by 2017 to 2022, it is the fact that military people, at least in the Navy, and people in the Department of Defense, people at NASA, and now just the broad spectrum of everyday people conducting science that I talk to, from people working on solar cars to people working on vaccines, you name it, they're all interested in this topic and I get no dismissal of it. The only person that ever was dismissive of this topic to me that is a scientist was somebody who was an astrobiologist working at a college in conjunction with NASA. And I said, your job is to look for life on other planets, and you're skeptical of the UFO claims. And so that's the only person I've ever found. Everybody else in astronomy, Avi Loeb is becoming the norm now. That's my observation. And I talk to people, you read my stories sometimes, Luis, the broad 95, 98% I write about has nothing to do with UFOs.
Yeah, well, I mean, you just wrote an article about the oldest turtle still.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and
still
I'll
slaying
be
it with the
writing that
ladies.
story, and I'll go, oh, where are you from? The debris? I go, yeah. I go, oh, hey, are we ever going to see the triangle picture? I go, what the F, right?
Yeah.
But I get that all the time. I get it all the time.
All right, so we're wrapping up here, but if you can answer this question quickly from Zofa Terrestrial with a $5 donation, says, Chris, would Chris agree that even though they don't seem to be from fourth dimension, they seem to have access to one of which allows them to bend 3D space?
I don't know.
All right, that's fair. That's fair. That's fair.
I give
That's
enough,
fair.
I think I know answers, that this is one that I'll just say I don't know. I will say this, Luis. Your hair looks fantastic today, really. My wife went out of her way to tell me. She said, let Luis know his hair looks fantastic today. And I think
I appreciate
nothing
it.
more important could come out of this show than that.
Well, tell you what.
I'll say that, I'm a believer of the warp bubble, so I'm going to say yes to Zofa's question.
Yes, that's right. I went shopping and I tried to find a big plastic bubble I could wear around myself when I came on the show, so I could tell you I was in the warp bubble. Look at Luis; he's never been happier. Look at it.
I love it.
Finally got me. You got me with the warp
Chris,
bubble, Luis.
Before you get out of here, tell everyone where they can find your work and where they can reach you if they have any questions.
Read me any day at thedebrief.org. That's where I write science, cutting edge topics. We have some amazing stories coming. Tim McMillan is working on a big UFO piece that I'm geek. I can't even tell you how excited. I've seen some of the research. I'm supposedly going to see a video. There's all kinds of stuff coming. If you want to follow me at @plane_fiction on Twitter. That's it.
What did you just do at the end of this interview, Christopher Plane? You said video. Now people are going to start going crazy and bothering Tim McMillan.
We don't have it yet. I'll tell you that.
What's going on?
We don't have this video we're being promised. But the stuff I'm hearing, the parts we've been able to confirm already, all confirm. Let's leave it at that.
Okay, all right. Well,
And
I'm gonna have to reach
way,
out. I'm gonna have to reach out to Tim and set up an interview
by the end of March. Whether we get it out or not, there's a process in place that will make this a video available at the end of March.
Okay. All right, Christopher Plane. There you go. Dropping a grenade at the conversation.
Sometimes I get them wrong, but when I tease something, I do bring it.
There's only one thing you ever tease that has been wrong.
It may be a video of a balloon and a rubber duck, but a video is coming, Luis.
All right, we're looking forward to it, man. I'm gonna ask Tim. I'm gonna put in my request for Tim's interview right now, so that way maybe we can get him.
Do it. Let's get him on here.
I appreciate it, Christopher Plane. We'll see you next time, my friend. Thank you for coming on and providing all this data.
Squid, good to see you, brother. Robin, nice to meet you.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Rather, I would just like to say my girl told me to tell you that you have excellent hair. It's just the best. And Lou, your hair is fair to middling. Sorry.
We'd all grow the luscious beards if we could. You have a great hair game yourself.
It's where I keep my fauna, little mice, field mice, birds. Thanks for having me, boys.
Dude, Robin, it was an absolute pleasure, man. I've really had fun. I can't wait to have you back. And I know we're trying to set up some stuff with you in the future with some other guests as well. And that'll be fun. But yeah, after today, dude, you're welcome back anytime you want to come hang out with us.
I hope I was helpful.
Oh, you were incredibly helpful. I think that the audience loved you. Audience absolutely loved you. So yeah, you're gonna have to come back. Unfortunately,
allegedly.
All right, my friend. Well, I'll let you go. I appreciate you being here. I love you to death, and we'll see you soon.
Mwah.
And hey, if anybody wants to ask you any questions or reach out to you or see what you're doing, you want to share what best place to?
Absolutely. You just hit up Lou. He'll send along to me.
There you go. Excellent. Thanks, man.
Bye.
All right, you guys, that was today's show. I hope you had fun. We've got a couple new members, don't we, rather?
We do, yeah.
What do we got here? Oh, Tina Tomaszewski!
Yeah, thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Tina, for being a member, a brand new member. Man, we got a lot of new members today. I can't appreciate you guys enough. And NeuroStream with a $2.99 super sticker. Appreciate it, you guys. Again, every single dollar you guys spend on this show is an absolute gift. I can't believe you guys do it, but I truly appreciate it that you do. It helps us do this show at least 3 days a week. We do have a Tuesday slot that's open now. We're playing around with some ideas on what to do with that Tuesday. If anything, we may leave it empty for now. I've got some ideas that I'm stewing around. So yeah, we may be coming back with something Tuesday. Also, you know, who knows? Daniel Miller's situation might change and he might be able to start doing shows again. So we'll see. Let's see what happens with Tuesday. But we're definitely here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 4 o'clock on Monday and Wednesday Pacific Standard Time and 1 o'clock Pacific Standard Time on Fridays. Brother, you got anything that you're working on this week?
Yeah, I'm putting the Council Bluffs, Iowa thing on a little bit of a hold, getting some interesting stuff there, but I've been researching quantum computers and what I think might be the first breakthroughs we'll have with this new technology, and I think it might be with material science. So yeah, subscribe over at Rather Be Squidding to get that first.
And again, you guys, all of these links for Rather, for Robin, for Christopher, for the all of the things that we talked about, not only the articles, but the interview with Lex Fridman and Gary Nolan, all of the links are in the description below. So please go support these guys because they're working their asses off. So truly appreciate that. Before we get out of here, of course, I want to say thank you to DOS Tapes. They provide all the tunes that you hear on the show. Their Bandcamp link is in the description below. Again, reminder, this show will be available on iTunes, Spotify, podcasts, wherever you find them. If you want to listen to us on the road or in the office, you can do that there. Please leave us a rate and review. It goes a long way to making sure that podcast continues to grow. Thank you so much to all of my Patreons out there and all the future Patreons that are coming. Love you guys to death. Because of you guys, again, this channel keeps going. So truly appreciate the support. And those who can't support in a financial way, don't worry about it. There are no paywalls here at the Unidentified Celebrity Review. All of our content is free for everyone. And it is available as soon as we post it. So if you can, leave us a like, share the show, subscribe, ring the bell. That way you don't miss anything that's coming up. Also want to say thank you to the moderators, Tina Tomaszewski, Aaron Desario, all the moderators, everyone who participated in the chats and the super chats and became members today. I cannot thank you guys enough. I'll just shout out one more time real quick because I just love you guys. Matthew Riot, NMUAP, Sparky Lady, Tina Tomaszewski, all of you guys, Cat1137, thank you guys so damn much. Matthew Ride, everyone for the donations and the super chats. Again, just I can't appreciate you guys enough. Truly appreciate it. And that's it. Check out the links below for our Discord. And yeah, we love you guys. Stay safe out there. Yeah, what do I normally say at the end of the show? Rather, there's something I know. Anyway. Thank you so much for coming aboard, getting weird with us here on another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP and UFO. Until Wednesday, you guys, we're going to have Melinda Leslie, the return of Melinda Leslie. Until then, we'll see you. Stay safe out there. Love you. Peace. I'm going to tell y'all right now, all of these wonderful people would not be here without Patreon supporters like you. If you enjoy credible news, reviews, and commentary on UFOs and UAPs 5 days a week, you want to support this show. What's your name? Marty. Marty, look how easy this is, Marty. Pick up your phone. Boom, you're a Patreon member. I mean, look, it's so easy. You just click the link, which is right here. Just for $1 a month, you can support this show. Just fill out the information and pledge what's comfortable for you. It could be $1, $5, $10, or who knows. Just support.